computer. All right, so we're on chapter 7, about halfway through the chapter. You can go to jewisharcadia.com/7886. And we're about halfway through the chapter. I just put a screenshot of where I'm up to. Masha einkem b'ma'achalis asurais. Such is not the case, however, with forbidden foods. Um, so we were saying that generally speaking, when we're talking about permissible acts, so eating ice cream, um, or enjoying a good steak on a Tuesday night, or a man and his wife doing the marital acts together, enjoying themselves. Uh, Neither of those are bad or good. All of them can, however, be bad. All of them can, however, be good. Or in Kabbalistic terms, bad will define as part of the three impure klipas, getting their vitality from the impure klipas, and good being something that's elevated to holiness. So everything in klipas noga, everything that comes from the shining klipa, aka permissible acts, have the ability to be elevated or to be degraded. However, even if they do get degraded temporarily into the three impure klippas, they could be extracted from there. They're not tied down. They're not usur. Usur, which means prohibited, also means tied down. It's bound in that area. So things that are permissible are not bound. They're not tied down, and therefore they could be extracted from there. Contrast that with prohibited acts, prohibited food, prohibited marital relations, which that is something that gets its vitality from the completely impure klippas, and it's tied down into those impure klippas and cannot be elevated from there until Mashiach comes and impurity will be removed from the earth. Or the Alter Rebbe says there's something called tshuva me'ava, tshuva from the love of Hashem, and that's what he's talking about over here. So I'm just going to review some of what we learned last week from Masha Einkein. Masha Einkein b'ma'achalis asurais ubiyas asurais. Contrast that with prohibited foods or prohibited relationships, shehin mishalish klipas atmeis lagamri, which come from the three completely impure klipas, heim asurim ukshurim. They are bound and tied down bidei hachitzayim la'ilam, in the hands of the external forces forever. Be'ein olam misham, and they do not rise from there. Ad ki yava yaimam vivula hamaves lanetzach, until the day will come and death will be swallowed up forever. That's based on a verse from Isaiah 25:8. K'maisha Kasuv, or as it's written in Zechariah 13:2, Ve'asruach hatuma avir min haaretz, and the spirit of impurity I will remove from the land. So death and impurity, as we explained last week, are synonymous with one another, and they will be removed in the future era of Mashiach. But what if you don't want to wait so long? Now, the Rebbe says, or until a person does such tremendous tshuva, that your wanton transgressions, your willful sins, meaning we're not talking about things like, it was a dark room, I thought it was my wife, it turned out to be my sister. We're talking about willful sins. That's somebody that does something that he knew was wrong, and he did it anyways. So there is a way to do tshuva where those willful sins can be transformed to merits, even in this present era. As the sages teach us in Talmud Tractate Yuma, that tshuva is so great that even wanton sins could be converted to merits. And the deeper meaning of this statement is that through a great tshuva, we can extract the godly vitality in the act of the sin. Because remember, even klipa cannot exist without godliness, cannot exist without some vestige of holiness in it, right? So a certain unique type of tshuva is able to extract that holiness from it and elevate it to holiness, to the realm of good, to the realm of godliness. Now, what kind of tshuva is this that we're talking about? And what's so great about it that it's able to elevate things that were extracted? How could such tshuva, so to speak, free the hostages, right? How can it free the forbidden acts that are being held hostage, that they're bound in the forces of klipa? So here he goes on to describe what that is. Shehi tshuva me'ava, this is a tshuva motivated by love, me'um kadaliba, from the depths of your heart, be'ava rabba, with a great love, v'chasheka, and a desire, v'nefesh shekeka, and a thirsty soul, ledavka b'yisbarich, to attach himself to Hashem, v'tzama nafshe Hashem ke'eretz hayefa v'tzia, and his soul thirsts for godliness like a tired out and parched land. So only this type of tshuva, the love-motivated tshuva, is able to transform wanton transgressions into merits. But not just that, this tshuva motivated by love has to be not just from any love, but from what's called ahava rabba. Now, the Gemara says tshuva me'ava, tshuva from love, without any adjective beyond the word love. But there are many levels in loving Hashem, and what the Gemara is intending to refer to over here is the most elevated level of loving Hashem, which is called Ava Rabba, which means a boundless love, which is a tshuva from the depths of the heart, that the soul is just thirsting like the thirst of a dry land that's completely parched and desperately awaiting rain. And so he applies this to the soul. Since until this point, till the point of tshuva me'ava, his soul was in a parched and deadly land. He has sitra achra, which is the sitra achra, the other side, or and it's distanced from the face of Hashem completely. which is really, truthfully, the spiritual state of somebody who commits a sin before he returns to Hashem. In other words, godliness is completely concealed from him at that time, because through every single sin that this person committed, he caused the power and the vitality that's inside of him to be nurtured from the side of klipa, which of course covers over the side of kedusha. And when you're trapped in the realm of klipa, you're completely desensitized and deprived of any feeling of godliness and excitement for godliness. You're just deprived of all of that, and so you're utterly distanced from the face of Hashem. And so the Alter Rebbe says, and for that reason, meaning because of this recognition that the person who's embarking on this tshuva journey he feels thirsty with a greater degree of thirst than a tzaddik. Now, if you think about it, a tzaddik, a completely righteous person, he's always dedicated to God. His whole day, his whole essence, his whole being is all about, God. I just want to be connected to God. I don't know if you remember in the 60s or 70s, there was a guy, his name was Gil Locks. So he was a bit of a guru. He had his crazy times, anyways. So I remember he describes that he had a bus that was spray painted and all sorts of graffiti. One of the big words on it was "Yeah, God." So, anyways, a tzaddik is all about "Yeah, God." A whole day. That's his life. But over here, the Alter Rebbe says that the person who's embarking on the tshuva journey, the person who realizes where his soul ended up, it ended up trapped in the hands of the 3 impure klippas, that person is now more thirsty than the tzaddik. Kima Amaram Zal, as our sages say in Gemara Brachas, But makim shabal litshuva eindim chulu, that the place where penitents stand, even tzaddikim don't stand there. So the more the person feels his distance from Hashem and recognizes that his soul is in a parched land, so that thirst for godliness intensifies, like somebody who's in a desert who's facing actual death, and and all he wants is some water to be saved from death. And for that reason, this person who is experiencing this sort of spiritual parchedness has a thirst for godliness greater than a tzaddik. That's what our sages mean when they say where a Baal Tshuva stands, even a tzaddik doesn't stand. Why? Because the thirst, the desire, as the Zohar says, yasir, it has a much greater arousal of the heart and greater intensity. The Baal Tshuva is much more intensely driven to attach himself to godliness because he's going to die, right? You need water if you're going to die. You know, it's interesting. Just yesterday, we were doing a didactic at my chaplaincy training course. And one of the things that our teacher mentioned was a video where this woman was presenting how when you survey people about their experiences, they remember negative experiences or negative feedback greater than positive feedback. You know, if your boss tells you 35 compliments in one area where you need to improve, you're going to remember that one negative more than the other 35, right? So I think this relates to this as well, that the Baal Tshuva, he needs water because he's going to die. He feels death. He's staring death in the eyes, and that motivates him to return to Hashem. The tzaddik, why does he want Hashem? He's like, God, yeah, God is amazing, right? I see the light. The light is good. They recognize the greatness of Hashem, and they appreciate the beauty in attaching to godliness. But because they're living in a world of holiness, in a world of light, they don't have that same thirst and burning desire, which is motivated when you're distanced from godliness, when you're lacking something. But somebody who was a Rasha, somebody who was evil and living in the world of klipa and spiritual darkness and thirst, the moment he recognizes his poor state and how distant he is from Hashem, he's gonna muster up all that energy to drive himself towards Hashem, like somebody who's coming out of darkness into light. A good example of this is somebody who realizes he's informed of a treasure that happens to exist in some particular place, and whoever gets to that treasure will be able to keep the treasure. And he recognizes the value of the treasure, and he runs with all his intensity to try to get the treasure. However, the running to get that treasure is a limited effort that he puts into that. However, somebody who's running away from death will run a lot quicker than somebody who's running towards a treasure of money. Why? Because running away from death affects your very life, and that's going to make you run, like your life depends on it. So, to use that metaphor, like your life depends on it, a Baal Tshuva, somebody who recognizes, oh wow, this is a terrible place where I ended up. I wantonly ate something that wasn't kosher, and I put my soul into this place, and I got to run away from this like my life depends on it. That's a whole different attaching to Hashem and yearning, burning desire to godliness greater than that of the tzaddikim. And the Alter Rebbe continues, Val tshuva me'ava rabazu, and it's for this type of tshuva, from such an intense love, Amru, that our sages say in Tractate Yuma, that one's wanton sins become like merits for him. Because It is the sins that caused him to come to such intense love. In other words, who runs faster? The guy running to the treasure or the guy running away from an alligator? The guy running away from an alligator. So it's the alligator that made him run at a speed that he never was able to do before, no matter what competition, Olympics, you name it, 100-meter dash, nothing could make him run like that alligator, right? So spiritually speaking, there is no place that you can reach through a tzaddik format of work that can be reached by the running away from the alligator experience of the Baal Tshuva, of the person who already ended up in the Sitra Achra, in the filth, in the side of negativity, and is now running away from that. So this is really the reason for this unique phenomena that sins can become merits. Because since the lowly state that was created by the sin, that is the very thing that caused the end of the day for this intense love and burning desire for godliness. As we explained, that the intense love of the Baal Tshuva to God was created from the fact that he felt that he was in a parched land, so to speak. So it's the sins themselves that brought out this new revelation of godliness, and that power is able to nullify the sins, and they turn into merits. Now, this is not easy to do. And so if you can, that's incredible. By the way, don't try it at home. Don't think like this can be a game plan. Go into the klippas and then just run away from that. But most people don't succeed at that. And even if you did plan to succeed at that, you're doomed to fail, because it says that if you plan to sin in order to do tshuva, then we don't help you do tshuva. So don't try that. But let's say in a normal case where somebody sinned because he wanted to sin, it felt good at the moment, and then later he feels the parchedness and how he has to attach himself to godliness, and does tshuva motivated by love, etc., etc. Great. But what about most of us? Most of us, we're not running away from the alligator. Yeah, we see the light. We see that we're supposed to do the right thing. We regret the past. But it's not the same intensity of running away from an alligator. So what about that? So the Alter Rebbe says, "Avol tshuva shalei me'avazu," tshuva that's not coming from such an intense love. In other words, even if it's motivated by love, but it's not such an intense love, afshi tshuva nechaina, even though it's certainly an apropos tshuva, Hashem yisachlei, and God will certainly forgive you. You do tshuva, you have a guarantee. God will, wipe your record clean. Nevertheless, those sins cannot now be transformed to merit. You can never make that piece of pork holy. You just can't. And they cannot be elevated from the klipa. Like those sparks got stuck there. You put the pork into klipa. You put it there and you can't get it out of there. You yourself might be extracted. You might be, wiped clean, but the damage has been done. Ad eis kates, until the time of the end of times, meaning when Mashiach will come, sheyevula hamavis lanetzach, when death will be swallowed up forever. So, even if a person did proper tshuva, appropriate to the sin that he committed, he regretted the past, he accepted resolve for the future not to ever do it again, and therefore God will forgive him, and he's indeed cleansed of his sin, of his record, and any darkness that he brought upon himself is nullified. That only if affects and reaches the person himself. But the sins themselves, the act of the sin, the energy in that sin, now added energy to the realm of klipa. And you can't correct that by doing tshuva, regular tshuva. And therefore, the godly vitality that he, the funds that he diverted, the godly vitality that he diverted into klipa through the act of the sin, don't exit the klipa by a regular tshuva. And the vitality cannot be rectified until the time when the spirit of impurity will be totally removed from the face of the earth. Um, so to summarize, the word isur, prohibition, comes from the word like a knot, something that's tied down. Because the godly vitality that exists in prohibited things with which a sin was committed, like prohibited food or prohibited relationships, is tied down into the hands of the klippas forever. That means until the time, at the end of times, when Hashem will remove the spirit of impurity altogether. However, even in today's day and age, it's possible to elevate the vitality in your act of the sin to holiness, and that can be done through you could even elevate the vitality that you put into the sin, not just yourself, but you could elevate the vitality of that sin, but that's only through a special kind of tshuva from ahava rabbah, which is grand love, intense love, in which the vitality of the act of the sin is indeed freed from its imprisonment in klipa and elevated to kedusha, and that's what our sages say in the Gemara, that such a tshuva from intense love transforms wanton sins to merits. And the reason is because the meditation of the Baal Tshuva in recognizing his great distance from Hashem, which was caused by his sins, that recognition alone is what motivates the thirst and the love towards godliness, and in a way that's greater than a tzaddik could ever experience. And because these sins are what caused the love in the first place, therefore that makes those sins into merits. And that means that even the chayus of those sins could be elevated to Kedusha. And next week we'll talk about the distinction between prohibited relationships with another person versus when a man does prohibited acts on his own. To be continued.